I think we should start with a clear way I misapplied a rule, which is that you're all short 50 experience points.
50? Oh, we get 50 more.
I think so, because I failed to add up the last encounter correctly, because there was a trap in it that I didn't include. I did the 4 creatures, but I forgot that the thing destroying the globe, the autopsy table thing, was a trap. Got triggered early on, so it didn't necessarily affect you, but it was there in the encounter. It could have the nasty things to you, so it's worth 150 experience points. It was level 3 trap, and so you get 50 experience points each.
Well,
I do not protest.
Nope.
As you say, you were then fighting a computer, the visualizer AI.
Trying to figure out, I'm trying to figure out if that's one of Ross's horrific little references or not, and I haven't come up with it yet. Unless it's the visual.
It's the place.
Yeah. Tazio, this is set in the Visualiseringscentrum, which is basically the visualization center. It's a science education facility here in town. And so, I mean, it's the visualizer, so...
there is no other horrible pun or anything.
Okay, I was just wondering if I was missing something there. But,
on that subject, I always feel like that reading the rulebook for this, that all the monsters have names, and like half of them seem like they're a joke, and half of them are a joke that they get, and the other half I have no idea what they're referring to.
Welcome to my world.
Yeah.
Indeed. I think it might be an American thing. That would make complete sense if you were, I don't know, raised in the D&D belt of America. Be perfectly sensible.
Yeah, I can't remember the creatures' names in the original version, whether they were actually very punny or jokey or not. I don't know. So did we want to have an encounter session about the mighty leap that may not have been?
So, yes, let's talk about that. I think the first thing to say is that obviously I'm applying lots and lots of rules from this, the Player's Handbook for Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition. And most of that makes sense, although it's easy to make mistakes doing it because there are lots more rules in there than there are in the Gamma World rulebook. There are some rules which are explicitly or implicitly not applicable to Gamma World. So action points never get mentioned in Gamma World, so presumably they're not a rule and that happen. And some places it uses slightly different terminology. So this is where I have the first place I have done you unfair treatment, which is that the spidery monster gains concealment when it moves 5 squares. But the rule just says it gains concealment on the monster write-up. And that's fine if you're playing 4th edition, where there is concealment or total concealment. But I was referring to the rulebook for Gamma World, which has partial concealment and total concealment. So it's not as difficult to hit as I've been making it.
Okay.
But it does also do lots of horrible things to you, including zapping people with bolts of energy that blind them potentially until you make a saving throw, which happened to Okma. And then we forgot about that, and therefore your cool stunt was able to go ahead. It's certainly possible you could have done that and done the stunt anyway. There are rules for you can't see a creature, but you want to know where it is. How can you detect it? And we can, if that becomes relevant again later on, which it might do, we'll go through how those work. And probably that would then have applied to, we could have applied that for you to be able to know where it was in enough directional information to run towards it, leap off of edge of a platform and land on it. Or maybe you wouldn't have been able to. We all never know because we didn't roll those dice. That's fine. It's more, I'm keen to think of this not as cheating personally, but as, vastly overcomplicated rule set in some ways. Trying to find the many myriad rules that can apply to a particular situation And sometimes you're going to overlook things and forget things. I don't think anyone's maliciously not thinking Ockhammer has been blinded and therefore has extra conditions attached, but we will leave you unblinded going forward and see what happens next. Okay. I don't think there's any point retrospectively applying it. I might let the creature recharge it without rolling its dice to see if it can use that one again, but that would be nasty because it's quite a nasty attack. In terms of the leap, I think that was pretty much reasonable in terms of if you could see it, you could run and jump onto it. We applied the rules for jumping. There's not explicitly anything about jumping being harder because you're carrying somebody or anything like that, so that's fine. Certainly, as far as I'm concerned, and our fiction, we all think of Ockhammer as being really big and strong and tough and able to do that sort of thing, pull jeeps around and things like that. It's possible that I should have applied an attack of opportunity against you when you landed on him, because you went into and then out of a square adjacent to him. That will. But since he was also static electrified, maybe we'll leave that alone for now. If it happens again, it happens again. There's a rule that I didn't know how to apply, which is the acrobatics rolls I gave you to avoid falling down out of the sky and hurting yourselves. Strictly speaking, you have to be trained in acrobatics to use that rule, but I don't. The opportunities to get trained in anything in Gamma World are a bit different to the fourth ed, so probably it's not unreasonable to let that one be used and apply. What else? As I say, then he's actually easier to hit than I was making. You only get a -2 because he's only partially concealed when he runs around and leaves, I don't know, light images in your retinas as he glows and looks weird. As I said, there are then complicated rules for blindness, which make it more difficult to find things, but not necessarily impossible. And also remind me that area effect attacks don't take a penalty for concealment in any case, which is probably quite important for you to know. So a -2 or even a -5 because they have concealment applies to melee attacks and ranged attacks, but it doesn't apply to any area effect attacks you have, so blasts or
bursts and stuff like that. Right.
Bursts. Yeah.
Aha, that's good. Okay. Helma had mentioned that you wanted to know kind of, I guess one could say game master logic, but that's not really true. What we really mean is group logic for a given group.
Definitely.
And I can tell you kind of the rubric that I take when I look at a situation in the previous session of play and I go, oh, we didn't quite do all that stuff right. So here's my rubric. The first question is whether that the river has run too far. Other things happened after it. Play proceeded after it. Things happened because of it. We effectively accepted it just by doing it and continuing to play. And forget it. Just forget it. That's, it's it's like the Kalashnikov. Something got stuck in the little magazine, but the gas just blew it out of the vents because that's how a Kalashnikov works, and it fired anyway. So okay, right. So that's one thing to check first. Another though is to look at and say if that's not the case, then it's at least eligible for review and revision. And so you look at it and you say, let's review it to see basically how bad was it? Did we, and it's not really a legalistic thing so much as, like how wrong were you, so much as does what happened really do violence to what we all accept for how we want to play this game? So, and in some ways, you even can do that if you followed the rules exactly and the rules stink. Right? It's the same logic. You're looking at the way it went, either misplayed or played, and you go, is that like why we're playing this game? I mean, does that go with everything else we do and have done and all the other mechanics that we've embraced? I mean, what is that? You know, so, and there are games where you look at a particular subsector of the rules and you're like, oh, well, that's trash. You know, that ruins everything if we have to do it like that. So misplaying a textual rule or following a bad textual rule, it's the same review. You know, you're just the issue is just, well, how did that go for how we play? And if you really like following the textual rules for this game, you can say, well, you know, it's okay. It could have gone that way. We didn't get there properly, but play could have gone there, and I'm okay with that. You know, we're just going to treat it as if the right rolls had been made here and there, and you know, keep going. And we'll just do it right next time. We all learn something. You know, let's do it. We'll hit. What's the big deal? You know, what's wrong with the learning curve, right? What's wrong with the proper process of learning? That's how it goes.
I couldn't say it better.
Yeah. Well. The trouble is, you got to do that first one first. Was it wretched? Right? Was that wretched? That's if you do the first step first and say this can't stand. We can't let this stand. And if you get past that and say, well, we could, now the question is, as a sort of minor question, do we want to? Because the opportunity is there for a retcon to say, you know what, everybody, hit the rewind button. We're going right back to the moment where you said you jumped. We're just running that through again, and we're going to end up where we end up. If it was right at the end of the session, if everybody is saying, you know, I am not feeling happy with having run it the way we did, and we've identified reasons, you know, why not? Either we hate those rules or we like the ones we didn't use or whatever. Let's do it again. And that's okay too. But I think that you would only do that if you decided in the first place. You don't do it because it's like wrong not to follow the rules in some legal way. You do it because you look at how play proceeded and you say that's not really how we want to be playing. And so you kind of would feel bad about that going forward. You know, going on, you look back and you say, okay, I can't remember that one little bit. I don't want that, you know, in our fiction. I guess I'll just pretend that was bad editing, bad directing, you know, a crap scene in an otherwise good movie. And I don't want to do that usually. And that's okay. I mean, it's tricky because I'm not following the logic of, oh, we didn't follow the rule, we have to go back and do it again. That's not the right logic. In this case, it's kind of an exercise too. I mean, you can play sort of a clever advocacy role. I mean, I could say, well, you know, Leica had made her perception roll. She could have been whispering in his ear and say, jump there, you know, jump 2 squares that way or something like that. And so you can, but that's not necessary. I mean, we can make that up for fun if we want to, but we don't have to make up little justifiers. Some of them are kind of fun. I for one, am perfectly okay with being blinded. I do think one thing we did right was that my leap was not the attack. So really, I mean, it was just leaping to a spot. It wasn't an attack roll. So leaping to a spot, it was an athletics roll. I made the athletics roll.
Yeah.
You know, can't fault that.
If I remembered about the blindness, it might have been appropriate for the perception check to know what direction to go.
Right.
And the perception rolls are fun. They give you and you tell the direction. And if
I know
you roll
that's
really well, and you tell the exact spot, which is quite good. I quite like that.
That is fun.
But in general, probably our first real proper run-in, doing all the perception things and all the stealth things, all these things.
Oh my god! Yes.
The first lurker monster I've used, and it's nightmarish. And